Andrew, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and spending some time with me and with Plan AP this afternoon. I know you're over in New York, correct?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah.
In Brooklyn. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to spend with me. Share with us some information about how you've you used Plan AP with us thus far, and really looking forward to showcasing some of your content on this platform as well. So, Andrew, I'd just love to hear a little bit more about how you ended up hearing about Plan AP, just to start.
Well, I mean, as I'm sure you know, and a lot of your people watching or your clients know, I mean, there's a whole industry built up around how artists can figure out ways to get their music to the people they need to. Forget about just getting it to the people they need to. There's an industry of people that has arisen that try to fill that need. But it was just through a very just calm conversation I had with someone at a music conference, an Australian A&R guy who suggested Plan P as a way that you can just sort of fire and forget. You can upload your album, you can pick a few places to send it to and just press go and then move on with your life and just know that that radio promotion or music supervisor promotion is just sort of handled for you through the really large number of people they have that are responding to that content. So instead of taking hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours to research and figure out radio stations to send to, find out their emails, find out all this sort of stuff, I can not do that by just going to play MPE, and using them. And it's affordable and has worked for me so far. This is the first campaign I'm doing though, with this first album. But I intend to do it again.
Fantastic. And I'm here to help support. As I mentioned, Andrew is actually a client of mine, and we discussed his, interest in using the platform. And when we're intaking clients, we provide them with as much information as we can in regards to the industry, where they best suit them in terms of where they send their content, but really just to build relationships amongst one another. We're not here to just toss our clients into the platform. We're here to help build their engagement. And hopefully get as many opportunities for success as we can through the platform. So thank you again, Andrew. I appreciate you being here. I remember that first talk that we had. You had a lot of questions for me, and I was 100% appreciative of all the questions you're asking. That just meant you were doing your due diligence with setting yourself up for success. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you spending some time with me today. So I have a couple questions I have lined up for you. And the next one that I'd like to ask you is just, we understand that you have had over 1,000 sync placements, mostly in TV and shows. That's amazing. And tell us a little bit more about this placement that you received in Japan.
Well, yeah, I mean, this it's very gradual and it happens over, I mean, I've been doing this now for a long time. I mean, I graduated from music conservatory like 20 years ago. So, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. And, you just continue to build a body of work, and I always make this music for me, and then afterwards see where it could be sold or where it could be used. Fortunately, the stuff I'm making is being used, and there are a variety of different companies you can put your music with, like a sub-publisher where they'll house your tracks and send it out to their people, and then if it's they'll be looking to find content to put in their stuff. For instance, like this one sub-publisher I worked with a number of years ago, they had Viacom as one of their clients. So Viacom has a million different networks and a million shows, and they need a lot of music for these shows constantly. So I was fortunate that a lot of my music was being picked. A lot of my tracks were being picked. It just sort of worked for what they were doing. I've sort of started to pull my music back from a few of these places, because I want to have it handled a little bit better. I think that it's great to get the placements, but I'm starting to be a little more discerning about where this music is going, and not just sort of putting it wherever it can go, because I think it's important that it be treated, properly, and not just one of a billion, tracks on a random server that be used. I mean, I suppose that works, but I'm starting to get pull back a little bit on some of these things.
Absolutely. It's always great to have that focus and really making sure that you get highlighted at specific placements that you want to more specifically, right? So having that focus with your release, knowing where you want to target it, and having set goals in mind, I think is great for you. Knowing which direction you're going to be really taking and having more control of that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, some placements are really cool. They're on, like I've had a lot of piano music used in Vice, some of their documentary series where they have these really
Oh,
cool.
amazing.
David Rodman goes to North Korea to play basketball. Like that
Wow.
series of documentaries, and so I've had music used in some of those, or one in Colombia. And it's great to be a part of things like that. And then there's one that could be for an energy company in Oklahoma for their year-round consumer report video, or
Right.
something like that, which is not sort of as sexy as a Vice documentary, but it still is bringing your stuff out to the marketplace, getting it used.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's all just exposure for yourself as an artist, and just helps get your engagement on a wider demographic, which is fantastic. And before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to open it up to anyone who has any questions. We will be taking some questions a little further down the way after I've gone through a few questions with Andrew. So please feel free to write in some questions for us that we'll take after this. And we'll come back to you. And whoever, we have 5 people or 5 questions that we'll choose from that'll actually be getting some swag from us. So toss in your questions if you have them for myself or Andrew, and we'll get to those shortly. Okay. But Andrew, in regards to that placement with Volkswagen Japan, tell me how you ended up hearing about
How did I end up hearing about that? Yeah, that's another thing. Sometimes you have something really great that goes on,
it.
and someone writes you to congratulate you about something really great that happened, and then you don't even know about it, and then you just
Right.
get excited like everyone else. Because sometimes, there's a lag. Something will be used, and then you don't find out till a year later when financial reports or payment reports come out.
Right.
Something happens right away. I mean, some things are more like that, but this was through a sub publisher that had seen the new album come out, and they felt that it was sort of a Volkswagen branded documentary about this really cool Japanese sculptor, this like fine artist. And I've actually written music about sculptors and fine artists before, and I think that for this Volkswagen spot, it just was it was just like a cool sort of artsy, synthy, silky, smooth, fluty kind of thing that could go underneath what this guy was talking about, and showing his these sort of scale models.
Yeah.
Very, very artful, very detailed scale models of vintage Volkswagen pieces, like a from the 60s or something. They were very antiquated, very beautiful looking stuff. So I think that a lot of times the minimalism and the sort of patterns that are running through my music, which may distinguish it from other people's music, or at least some of my other music, sometimes it lends itself to a more fine art sensibility, and accordingly maybe is thought of by producers that it adds more value to the production.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a great way to explain it. And tell us a little bit more about your music, and I guess your process with writing as well.
Well, I would say that I generally tend to write like in 3 different areas, which is piano music, songs, and sort of instrumental ambient electronic music. I think that they all have the same sort of classical underpinning to it. So it's sort of like accessible modern classical music. And sometimes it's going to sound more like concert hall, sometimes it's going to sound more like synth pop. But there still is a sort of a thread of something that's perhaps a little bit deceptively complicated or deceptively simple about it. I think there's always something in it that is bringing it a little more in the classical realm, even if it is a synth pop track or an ambient electronic track. I think maybe it could just be that there are more layers going on, there's more going on in it. But and so I'd say that it's 2 great loves of mine: the sort of modern classical music, and then of course pop music, like 80s pop music, and so I use some of those sounds, and the notes that I'm writing let's say the more classical notes, I'm using those sort of pop sounds to realize those notes.
Right.
So I guess you could think like look at a piece of classical music that you're using synthesizers for, rather than a string quartet or something like that.
Right. Right. I mean, I grew up listening to 80s music, so I can kind of hear that absolutely in some of the synth production that you've added into your work, and it just makes sense. Like the combination of that classical background with that 80s inspiration is definitely there. You can see that, and I really enjoy your content. It's great.
No, I appreciate that. And I'll say one guy told me that he thought because of the way the synthesizers were used in a more classical way, we're talking about like very subtle shadings of taking some of these electronic sounds where, if you push the key down this hard, it sounds like this. If you push it a little softer, it's going to be a little softer. And so there is a lot of that nuance with these synthesizer sounds that I'm using, much in the way that a clarinetist or a French hornist or a cellist is playing. Like there's a lot of nuance there. And the same can be true with these synthesizers. So a friend of mine called my music, he said he likes to use the term electronic impressionism.
I like it. I
thought that sounded really nice, so I said thanks.
Absolutely. I mean, that could open up a whole new genre right there.
I think that this new album, Invisible Days, the 15-year re-release, which does now have string quartets on it, I think that it is an example of this electronic impressionism. And it's the first album I ever put out years ago, but I just never felt like it was completed in the way that it needed to be. And it got remixed and re-edited, and I added string quartets to it, and it's an expanded release. And it's funny, it's like the first thing I did, but I'm going back to the first thing I did and sort of picking up from there. Sometimes maybe the first thing you make is actually really what you do want to be making all the time. Sometimes people say, oh, an artist doesn't grow, an artist doesn't change. Well, I mean, Bret Easton Ellis wrote a sequel to Less Than Zero. The novelist, Less Than Zero came out in 1985. A million years later, he wrote a sequel.
Yep.
I mean, that's what he wanted to do,
That's it. Sometimes it's just about going back to your grassroots, right? And
sometimes the first thing you make can still be, something really exciting and something you want to continue to riff off of and sort of use as a major influencing force.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it gets you to really understand and kind of come back to where your head was when you wrote that initial piece. It kind of takes you back in time a little bit, but then with all of your experiences that you've had through your releases that followed, you've taken all that knowledge now and been able to apply that to this initial release. And I think this 15th anniversary release album just sounds great. Sounds great.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, it certainly was. It was more of a post-production thing than it really was a production thing, at least for the electronic tracks. But I think that as you're saying, in the very beginning, I only had, one synthesizer, didn't really know how to use it that well, used it with my friend. We were really excited. It was like a toy. I had only really been like the clarinetist and the saxophonist before that. And then I got the synthesizer and was playing around with it, and it was very exciting. And so, yeah, one wants to go back and sort of re-experience that,
Absolutely.
So.
But fantastic. Well, can you provide us with any sort of advice that you would give other artists who are seeking any sort of sync placements, especially since you've already had over 1,000 sync placements at TV specifically? I'd love to hear some advice that you'd be able to provide.
Well, of course, I think just write. I hear people say this at like panels at music conferences, or I read this, but I think it's true. It's like, forget about trying to place your music. Forget about any of that stuff. Just go by yourself and write the very best piece of music that you can for yourself. Like, impress yourself, enjoy the process. Just write the music you want to write. Do that. Then put that on a shelf, and then you're going to take a very different psychology towards that, where you're putting it in the marketplace.
Right.
Once you're finished with it, it's on the shelf. Then you can sort of take a different mindset for it. But I think you just write these pieces of music for yourself, put them on a shelf, and then send people the work, or find some places that will listen to your tracks and consider adding it to their catalogs, so that the people like at Viacom or other clients, can stumble upon it and think that maybe, okay, well, that works for for a piece. I have a friend. He has a song that he wrote for himself. He just liked the song. He put it up with one of these services, and then a wrestler from the World Wrestling, WWF Wrestling, like one of their wrestlers, like found his song and uses it as his ring entrance music.
What?
So I mean, it's incredible. He's a great this British singer-songwriter. He's a bassist. He plays in the Jesus and Mary chant. He's a fantastic artist. And that came through. He had his track on that service, on that website. So the client signed up with the company, and then they get to surf around. And they put keywords on. I'm looking for a piece that's fast, that's piano, that is rhythmic, is there are a variety of keywords and parameters, and then it'll spit out like try these 7 tracks, and then they'll try them and see which one works best for whatever production or what they need the music for. And so you got to be in it to win it. It's like the lottery. So a lot of times it's like winning the lottery. You just like put your music in there, hope for the best, but you got to get your music in there for it to be picked.
Right.
And the other thing I would say is that also speaking of England, a guy, and I think he's totally right when he says this, but it hit me at a certain angle, which I found very interesting, that there is an insatiable demand for accessible piano music.
That's great to know. Yeah.
So if you make a piece of music, as far as advice for people, I had lunch with a guy a few months, I don't know, half a year ago, and he was asking me the same question, and I said, well, you're making these songs, it's like these like indie rock songs or whatever, like why don't you create piano instrumental versions of these tracks? You don't have to spend a year doing it, or just find someone else to do it. Just take a few hours, do it and record it and move on, and then you can add those tracks also. So they might not be something that you want to release yourself or put on the radio or do stuff, but I mean, having an album of like 10 songs and then having 10 piano instrumental versions of those songs, it's possible that the piano music will be used in a commercial setting or in a sync setting more than the original indie rock song with the vocals or an instrumental version without the vocals. So that's one easy way to increase your number of titles and get more balls in the hopper that might get picked. It's just like create a piano arrangement and a piano recording of your piece.
That's great. That's great because I believe in that regards, then it's just providing it with a multitude of options in regards to where it can be placed, because the feel can kind of fit in multiple.
Absolutely. Piano can work maybe in other places that the indie, the sort of more electronic indie rock band sound would. So, and again, I mean, you don't have to necessarily be so precious about it. You just create the arrangements or find someone else to do it. I do it. I've done it for people. Create the arrangements, put them up, record them, send them in, and move on.
There you go. Maybe that's another
option. You don't have to have a whole existential crisis about writing piano music. You just do it and move on.
Well, maybe that's another avenue that you could explore as well with your project and with your music, providing that as a service for other artists who are looking to do that too.
Yeah, I've done that with a couple of songs. I have a friend who had a song that, and he and I, when we write songs, I mean, songs can cost a lot of money to write. I mean, if you want to produce them, in a certain way. I mean, I'm not talking like Taylor Swift where it costs $1 million to make. So literally talking costs $1 million to make. But you can have a song easily cost like $25,000 just to produce it. But maybe you have a song that you don't have the time or the money to do that with. So you want to scale it down smaller, and you can just create a piano vocal arrangement, and you can put that out and it is what it is. And I've done that. I've done that for people, and it becomes its own thing. And that doesn't mean that you can't go out and record that song later with full blaring, Pet Shop Boys sound design or take a full band and do anything like that. But sometimes piano vocal, I mean, it is the song. It's down on paper. It's an artifact, and it is in a sense one possible version of the song that is done.
Right.
So I've done that.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, did you have any sort of other advice for artists who are looking to even get to radio?
Well, one of the best things that ever happened to me in radio was that I was at a music conference, and after a panel, I just waited online. I wasn't even going to, and then my friend said, no, you just wait in line and wait to talk to this guy. And I gave him my CD, and the next day, my song was the first song on his radio show the next day at this big radio station in LA. So,
Wow.
I mean, you have to write a good song,
right?
But, you know, I told him, you know, okay, I'm a fan of yours and I know your show and I've listened to it and you know, this is who I made this project with, and you know, I think you'd like it, you know, and he knew some of the people that had worked on it with me. He had interviewed them, had them on his program before, so I think that led to that. So
absolutely, yeah.
Maybe quality over quantity. So you can write to 1,000 people, but maybe just find a few people at first,
right?
And just get them playing your stuff, and maybe get them interviewing you, like in your town, college. Maybe just sort of say like, I'm just going to go to like a few local colleges and a few other national stations, influencer stations, and then just you know, start small.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you don't, you have a spreadsheet that has 50 billion pieces of information on it that's so disorganized, which I can attest to because I have one in my office down the street. I have a big mess of information. So maybe it's better just to start small and to just calm down and just relax and don't hyperventilate. I've spent a long time hyperventilating on it. So.
Right. I think that's great advice, because I mean, you know, when you consider the landscape of, I would say, quantity of music that's being released on like a daily now because of the accessibility of just being able to create music from anywhere, people tend to go with quantity over quality. I feel like at certain points in everyone's career, they want to just get more content out to boost their engagement, right? But I would wholeheartly agree with the quality portion, because that's where you have to span any sort of good successes from any sort of release that you do is that quality of that content.
Yeah. I mean, and of course you can go to Play MP3 and just have them send it out to that list. You could probably, in about 4 hours of work, you could get that music out to 1,500 people that work at non-commercial radio, NPR, and college radio in the United States and Canada, which is what I did.
Right.
So that's 1,500 people. I could have spent hours, a million hours researching, doing this and that, but I found you guys and I just did it. And they press send and it just gets, you know, sent out, and then I can just move on with my life and just do other things.
There you go.
Not worry about that delivery, not worry about finding places to send it, not worrying about having you know, that stuff. And if you write that press release properly, and if you reference, you say, well, I'm inspired by you know, this artist and that artist. Well, if someone who sees that email, you know, likes those artists too, then they're gonna take a, you know, they'll play a couple tracks and see if they like it.
Right. Yeah. That's and that's great. You know, the value of Play MP is absolutely through our lists and our list management, because we're constantly updating that to ensure that we have the most up-to-date lists as possible, because we understand that the industry is ever changing. So it's something that we have a dedicated team of who are constantly updating those lists per region, per format, whether that's at our radio recipients or our media publications, promotions. We understand that the industry is ever changing. It's a community, and people intertwine throughout all of the parts of the different communities as well. But that value is there with the lists, and I'm glad that, you know, you've found it of value with targeting the non-commercial and some of the lists within the U.S. that we had. But I know right before we jumped on this IG Live, we talked about how you just got some radio play over at Denmark. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, it came in the typical way, which is it was not typical at all. I met a guy a bunch of years ago. Yeah, I was telling David on the earlier this morning that I got some royalties from Denmark, music played on the radio there unexpectedly. And it was just, I just met someone at a concert in New York. He was a very nice guy. He was traveling by himself. He works for the Danish National Radio. And I just kept in touch with him, sent him my releases when they were done. I would mail them over to Denmark, and he liked my music and put it on the air. So I guess maybe this is the advice. If you go to a concert and you meet someone, be nice, be friendly, swap cards, send a nice note, kindly send your music, and hope for the best.
I think that's great. I think that across the
That's
board.
great. My wife and I, we were over in Denmark a couple years ago, and hung out with him and his family. We had dinner and stuff like in the suburbs of Copenhagen. It was great. It was fantastic. You know, as you said, intertwining. What I think that's a great word. I'm intertwining all over the place. You know, if I'm writing a violin sonata and having it played, I'm intertwining with the concert music world, the violinists and you know, pianists and you know that sort of stuff. And also one thing you talk about sync. Sometimes you may come really close to getting a sync,
Right.
but then you don't end up getting it, and that can be a little disappointing. I mean,
Right.
so you know, like you submit some music for like a fillet of fish commercial in Australia.
Right.
And I was like, okay, yeah, it would be amazing if this violin sonata was in a McDonald's commercial. I mean, it didn't happen, but it feels good. Just to be in the conversation for that. I mean, you know, one of those will hit or does hit every now and then. But I didn't think when I was writing it, like, oh yeah, I wrote this because I think it would be great to go in a commercial for a fillet of fish. But like, it just that's where things go. Some of the artiest art music that I've ever heard. Some American sort of post-war music. There's a composer. His name is Morton Feldman, and he writes. It's sort of like the musical equivalent of looking at a Mark Rothko painting. Okay, so these are like pieces in long duration. They're usually chamber classical pieces, but they're long. They sort of just take on this ambient. It's sort of like you're in a field of the snow falling on you, and then maybe the piece is about 18, 19 minutes long, and you're just listening to it, and you're listening to it, and you're listening to it, and eventually you just, part of you just sort of buckles, and eventually goes and takes over.
Right.
In about like minute 13, and then it's like, whoa, I know what this is. Whoa. And then you just sit there, and it's just the most wonderful thing. So it's a little, the music is, shall we say, a little bit strange, but I was walking through the hallways at an old temp job about a million years ago, a drug company, and I heard this Morton Feldman music coming out of this edit suite. And I thought, what on earth? I poked my head. I said, what's going on, Morton Feldman? They were making a commercial, or like not a TV commercial, but like a industry commercial or conference, I don't know, online commercial for a schizophrenia drug.
Oh, wow.
And that music is perfect for a schizophrenia drug. You know, or like a mental health thing. It was perfect.
Yeah.
It worked perfectly. It was beautiful. And then I remember thinking, okay, I get it now. I've learned everything is syncable. You know, everything is possible. If I saw Justin Timberlake with 11 trombones as a musical guest on Saturday Night Live, that would not surprise me. Everything is possible. 11 trombones and a singer, absolutely something that could be as pop as possible.
Yeah, right. Was that off of his Future Sex Love Sounds album?
I just made that up. I mean, it could be 25 or 11 oboes. I don't know, whatever.
Right.
Nothing surprising me.
Right. Well, I think all of that is great because it just gives everyone a better understanding of, you know, how to really network. Essentially, with anything that you're doing, building a network and building relationships is kind of how you just gain additional opportunities, and that's not different at all within the music industry. Or if you're considering going into placement with music supervision, having those networks and building those relationships are key to thriving for yourself as an artist, but then just to build your network and just meet great people along the way.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, as far as me, every now and then you'll meet someone that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily be in touch with. There's a radio host in Manchester, England, who wrote me after he read a review of one of my albums, and he said, you know, can you send me a copy? I did, and he played my music on the air for a bunch of years and interviewed me on a show. And he was like, very, very nice man. He wrote me just the nicest notes and emails, and you know, I would say, I'm frustrated about this, that he'd say, keep your head up, you deserve your success, just a matter of time, just relax. And
that's nice.
I mean, he was a really special guy. He passed away. He was an old
my condolences.
But I still have you know, an email that he wrote me. It's taped up on the wall in my office because it was just so loving and so kind and inspiring and supportive. So you know, you're not going to meet that person every day, but if you look and work hard, you know, you'll find those people that will be there for you. That when you're feeling down about stuff, you can look at the wall and remember that and hold that feeling, and that can get you through some times where you're feeling down, where you don't know what's going on. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, my condolences, Andrew. You know, those sort of people don't come by often, but when they do, you hold on to those relationships dearly. And that's just amazing to hear that you kind of by luck ended up having that sort of relationship with that with him. And
Yeah.
it's always helpful when you have people that you can really lean on, especially during times like this. You know, having people that you can communicate with. You're having a hard day, you hop on a quick little Instagram live with your friend, or a quick little video call, and a little bit of time spent with people that you care about goes a long way. So that's great.
Absolutely. And I'm also, as far as if you're trying to get your stuff synced, I mean, just participating in the exercise of making your work, and just focus on your work, and the rest of the world vanishes while it's just you and your work.
Yeah.
When you live in that, everything disappears,
Absolutely.
and then you live in that, and then eventually you come out of that. But at least for that amount of time while you're in the work and everything else disappears, there, it's you can feel really fulfilled and happy, and accepted, like in your own little world.
Absolutely. That's great. No, that's beautiful. Yeah. We actually got one question that I'd like to ask you from KC Coultar. This is for Andrew. What artists were you influenced by, or were your inspirations? Coultar, thanks for the question.
Thanks. Well, I mean, growing up, I was a very serious classical clarinetist, and so I mean, I suppose I would have to say to some extent I was influenced by um, Mozart and Brahms and Stravinsky, and I mean, I studied the clarinet literature very seriously, and I played piano too, so I played Bach. So obviously, this classical music, all right, everyone's influenced by classical music in a sense, but I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, I think sort of being the DJ for my third grade, like in school in third grade, I was like the DJ, and I played for the party. I played like Duran Duran and Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and stuff like that. Like just is the early stuff I remember. But as I started getting older, I mean, and I don't necessarily think that you know it if in hearing my music, but one group that I really came to love, partly because I was a saxophone player, was Steely Dan. Because I just think that there's a certain thing that they figured out, or and triumphed within a certain sort of world that they created themselves. Pet Shop Boys, huge influence on me. I think Pet Shop Boys are fantastic. I mean, like virtually everybody does, but I think they're underrated in terms of being influencers. I don't think they're fully given the credit for how innovative they've been. They're obviously loved, and they make music people love, but I think they really are such game changers. They were very innovative and changed a lot of things for a lot of different artists. I'd say right now, as far as the music I'm writing, that's a good question. Sometimes, but what I realized actually after writing Invisible Days was I wrote it, and afterwards I was listening to it with a few people, and we realized, oh, this sounds like this sounds like that. I guess I was influenced by those people, but
Right.
sometimes don't know it until after the piece comes out, and then you can listen to it and say, oh, I was influenced by that person. I didn't go into writing Invisible Days by saying, all right, I'm going to try to create the sound of classical 70s minimalism a la Steve Reich and Philip Glass, and then fuse that with the 80s sound of Depeche Mode. Like, I didn't go into writing that album like that. But then afterwards, when I heard it and read some reviews about it, I said, well, yeah, I guess it is true. I guess it kind of does confuse 80s and minimalism. And so that makes total sense to me. But right now I'm working on some new songs, and I got to be honest, I don't know what. I mean, the songs generally written out on paper and pencil, and they're pretty much there. But as far as sort of solidifying the arrangements and applying the sound design on it, I have no idea at all what I'm doing.
And that, I think that in part is a big part of the fun as an artist. You find inspirations and influence from sometimes just day to day, and especially with what's going on right now, being influenced by the times, or being influenced by how you're engaging with your friends. There's a lot of things that come into play when you start creating content. And we had a question also here by I'm Jordan Scott. Thanks for the question, Jordan. he was kind of asking about your writing process. Do you try and write a bit every day? Tell us a little bit more about that, Andrew.
Oh, I'm going to answer that through the framework of the pre-COVID quarantining situation, where yes, I do write music every single day, and I couldn't imagine not doing it, at least to some extent. Now, sometimes that might be that the third draft of a piano piece is sitting on my piano, and I just sit down and play through it and change a few things and play it. I mean, I'm the sort of person that, especially with piano music, I sort of just need to live in it and just play through it a lot, and over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, that piece will finally be quote unquote finished.
Right.
You may have played it in a number of places or recorded it or whatever, but very rarely for me is it that I can sort of wake up, write a full piece of music, and finish it in a few hours. I can do that. Usually that's if it's a commercial commission, writing a demo for someone or something like that, because there are just parameters on you that you have. You know, you get a project on Tuesday afternoon, and by Thursday at 9 a.m. you have to send in a recording of the piece. Well, you don't have time to sit around and think about, you know, life.
Right.
You just have to write it, and that's a really great piece of inspiration. But for me, I think it's like composition is like you write it, you have a draft. I tend to write the full piece out, like it's virtually the entire piece is there, and then I work with it as opposed to just writing a little bit at a time. A few measures at a time, I mean, I generally very quickly tend to have the landscape of the entire piece very quickly.
Yeah.
And then I can go in and then interact with that. And it's the interacting with the draft, the first draft. It's what I do in editing or interacting to improve and enjoy the process of improving that first draft or second draft or third draft or playing through it and saying, all right, well, this is the best part of it, I think. And this is sort of the weakest part of it. So let me sort of it's sort of like you take a syringe and stick it in the really good part, suck a little bit out, and then inject it into the part that's not so good.
Right.
In a sense. And that was the trick a composition teacher taught me, like an analog, an analogy that someone taught me. So
yeah. I like the analogy.
But I think that if you can truly participate and lose yourself in that process, by improving the first and improving the second draft and interacting, that is composing, because you don't know what you're getting. It comes out of a different layer, you know, of yourself. That's where the education is, and that's where the growth is. I mean, at least for me, you know, like some people, maybe they just want to like write a draft and move on. There's some people that do that. You know, certainly a lot of the great composers have done that. They would wake up, you know, and have a cup of coffee and write a movement of a sonata and move on.
Yep.
I generally tend to take a really long time to write anything. But I will say that if you're writing 79 or 171 compositions at a time, like me, then you're always having something that's coming off the pipeline.
Right.
It's just, I could have 200 pieces that I'm in the midst of writing, and they're all at various places in the pipeline. Some have been composed and they're being worked up in a sequencer, or like with musicians or whatever, being recorded. Some are just sketches or something like that. Some are about to be recorded. I mean, there's just you're sort of in all phases of production on a lot of different things at the same time. At least for me, that's the way that I've found that I work best. Because I'll work on something and then I'll be able to swivel and then work on something else and be able to work on something else and then work on something. That might not work for other people. They might just want to work on one thing at a time.
Right.
But I haven't been able to really do that.
Right. I mean, that's just part of your creative process that you've really been able to discover over the many years that you've been making music. So that's great. When you find what works for you, that's how you know you've really gotten to know yourself as an artist and your just creative process, which is great to hear. And we have another question coming in from Sang Brown. Thanks for tuning in, Sang Brown. She wants to, I believe, sorry, my apologies, Sang. She wants to see if she can have a look at your home studio. Maybe at some other point you can send a direct message to Andrew and he can give you a little tour of his home studio. He's like, they're asking.
Well, I don't really have a home studio. I mean, I have a piano at my apartment.
Oh, there you go.
And then I have down the road, about a 15-minute walk, 10-15-minute walk, I have an office slash studio,
Mm,
where I have my gear and I have all my other stuff. I would just describe it as sort of like an enhanced desktop musician's setup. I don't have the sort of acoustics or the sort of room that's treated in a certain way that would let me mix or record. And I'm not a mixing engineer anyway.
right.
So generally, I tend to work up things in my own MIDI workshop, and then I can bounce those to disk, and then I can send them out to other people who are mixing engineers who have all the fancy gear or all the whatever. So and really and truly, I try to have it as simple as possible.
Okay.
Really, really simple.
Yeah.
It's not impressive. Really, it really is. It's not. It's a computer. It's some good monitor speakers. Good high quality, but not the best quality. And I don't have any special foam on the walls or anything like that. It's a
Okay.
very functional office.
And sometimes that's what people have as a home studio. It's whatever they can really make out of the situation that they have with the space that they have as well. So making the most of something minimal and you still have a great album to show means that you've really been able to figure out your process and with your network been able to create something that's really great. So I appreciate you sharing that with us as well. And we have um, from Jessica K. Kelly. Thanks for the question, Jessica. It was for Andrew. Any practices or advice when you have writer's block?
Um,
I know that could be a tough question.
I don't. No, I know it's not. It's a tough question. It's a really good question, but I don't think I've really had it because
Mm, that's amazing. I don't think.
no, no, and I mean it like this because and I don't mean to say I've never had writer's block, but what I'm saying is that the way that I've been set up and have since the day I graduated from school, and this is like absolutely looking at the like Philip Glass Enterprises, which is where I an intern and worked. There's always something you can be doing to
Mm,
move your art forward.
right.
So if you're blocked and you can't write a new song, well, you can probably be researching things to help your band go on the road, or you can just be practicing your previous songs, or you can be going online and sending out info to try to get other people to listen to your existing songs.
Right.
Be trying to publish those songs, or you could be trying to find filmmakers and other kinds of artists that can use your songs and things and search out. So if it's not exactly directly making a new song,
Hmm.
you can still be productive and find avenues where you can sort of be a little bit pumped up to do that.
Right.
You can still figure out ways to push yourself forward, even if you're not writing B flat, G, F, F major, whatever. Like if you're not exactly composing a song, there are
Right.
still a lot of things around that you can still be doing to
Absolutely.
move yourself forwards. And then eventually, the chips are, ready to fall, and then you will eventually get back in it.
That's great. Yeah, that's great advice. Keeping yourself busy, knowing that you have other avenues to explore, as opposed to only focusing on the creative portion, and turning that other part of your brain on when you need to do a little bit more research
Yeah.
about how to
I'll say
achieve those.
I'll say this also, like to use a baseball analogy. Sometimes there'll be an offense that's playing and they're not getting anything. They're getting no
Right.
hits, no runs, and they're like dead. And suddenly, when the team's in the field, the shortstop makes a brilliant play, and
Right.
it just gets the team pumped up, and they're high fiving and everything like that. And then they go in, and then suddenly that just gets the whole team pumped up, and they go up at bat, and suddenly their bats turn back on again.
Right.
So other areas can get you pumped up. Someone makes a killer diving catch or whatever. It can really like get all the juices flowing. When they get up to the plate the next time, they use that as energy and ride that wave, to success writing or whatever.
Absolutely. I don't know much about baseball, but I know about diving catches on highlights. So that part I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I got one more question before we look into getting a little bit of a live performance with you, Andrew, and it's from Will MC Will McDonough. What is the purpose of your success in your field? What do you hope to accomplish? That's from. Thank you so much, Will, for sending over that question for Andrew.
What do I hope to accomplish?
Yeah.
I want to. I want to be able to keep myself feeling good in
Mm.
that in my life when I've had moments that I've sort of turned away from music, when I finished high school and went first into like a normal college before I went to music school, or other times maybe I sort of drifted away. Like it's always been fraught with difficulty, and for whatever reason it is that music is the thing that is keeping me afloat, or it's what I'm here to do. I don't know. When I was younger, I played and I was just good, and I just kept progressing and working. It was just something I was good at. So I I just want to keep doing that, and of course you have to make a living too. So I think marrying those two together is the answer to that question. And so
Mm.
um, I think that I think that as if we're talking to people who want to get their music synced or have questions about writer's block, or just any questions in general. I mean, for me at this point, I feel that like the struggle or the journey or the issues or why am I not getting this or I want this to happen and it's not happening, unfortunately,
Mm.
I'm starting to know that the answers are not out of me; they're all inside of me.
Mm.
Like I am the final frontier for all of this stuff, so I have to go inside myself and improve that or think through those things to get the success that I want.
Mm.
I'm my own best friend and my own worst enemy.
Right.
So
Abs-
so I think that what I want to do. I mean, in a sense, I mean, if you're an artist and you're really in it for the art, I mean,
mm.
you get into your world and you're making your stuff and like you let yourself, like I mean, when I was in music school and I was doing like more academic program, like you couldn't really write like a C major chord or just sort of more like a more plain harmonic language.
Okay. Yeah.
But eventually, like you want to be able to allow yourself to write, 145 or C major or whatever. I mean, that like to write C major and really mean it is a lot harder than just writing some complex academic gobbledygook.
Right.
So I think the idea of just allowing oneself to do what they want to do, to stop self-censoring and allow themselves to be who they are, the journey towards self-acceptance maybe is the goal.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of us struggle with that on a daily basis. There's more light being shed to mental health and everything like that in the past like 5-10 years. I've struggled with some of that in the past myself, but I think being able to make yourself happy and find what brings you joy is the key to all of this. And that's thank you so much, Will, for that question, because I think that has a larger meaning as opposed to just focused around our careers. It's just around our day to day and how we live, essentially. So I thank you so much for that question, Andrew. Yeah, I love that response.
all right.
Amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. I apologize for that on the last track. Both sounded beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing that with us and spending some time with us this afternoon on this beautiful Friday. What's up next with Andrew and your content?
What is up next? I have some songs I got to finish up and get out. It's a collaboration I'm working on with an author. Just found a singer. So, What's next? I don't know. There's always something. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's something big on the calendar, and you're looking, and 14 months from now, this is a big gig coming out, and you have that on there. Sometimes it's just a constant sort of. You get to a point, maybe there's just like a constant flow of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Goes.
Well, there you go. I mean, sometimes it's good to keep it open-ended and then be able to work on upcoming projects that just come our way more organically, right? But Andrew, I'd like to thank you for being our very first Instagram Live guest. Thank you so much for spending that time with me this afternoon. Beautiful music. I want everyone to please take some time, go check out Andrew Shapiro on his social medias. Follow Andrew on his Instagram pages, of course. Hashtag PlayMPEbook to make sure that you stay looped in on any sort of future online events and news. And thanks again, Andrew. I appreciate your time. This has been great.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thanks for everybody for being here. And good luck.
All right. Absolutely. Bye. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Be sure to follow Andrew on his social media accounts and be sure to stay tuned for upcoming events with Play MPE.
Thanks. And I'll see you again soon, Dan.
Absolutely, Andrew. Okay, we'll talk soon about your next release with us, okay? Call me after this.
That's would be my pleasure. Okay.
All right, take care.